Good afternoon and welcome to CEC Gurukul lecture. In continuation with the series on sociology of kinship, in today's lecture, we're going to discuss the study by Patricia Jeffrey and Roger Jeffrey on the relationship between demography, gender and politics. Now this lecture is based specifically on one particular reading which we're going to discuss in detail and try to understand how to understand the complex relation between demography, the factors like fertility, birth rate, and how do we kind of look into a larger context. So much of the research earlier, demographic research, the demographer were trying to understand these factors at individual level in terms of the rise in birth rate or decline, the death rate, mortality rate. As anthropologists and sociologists are trying to link this individual experience of these facts with the larger context of the economy becoming more rational, more based on market and political changes that was taking place, and post 1990s where they say the Mandal Commission, the Ayodhya communalism and other changes taking place, the debate between population, gender and politics becomes very complicated. And therefore, we need to kind of understand the interrelationship between the three. So if we go directly to the reading and the study done by Roger Jeffrey and Patricia Jeffrey in the two districts of Bijnor in Uttar Pradesh, and try to look into the data which comes in from the research. There were a lot of hurdles faced by the researcher because reproductive choice questions around gender relations are not easily discussed by men and women, and therefore to kind of get an exact answer about whether women have a choice in making decisions, talking about their reproductive rights is kind of again not straightforward. So Roger Jeffrey and Patricia Jeffrey suggested that gender and politics of population are intricately tied to inequalities that are far more complex than simply raising levels of education or positing gender equality. A central aspect of much of population literature on developing country has been the link between lowered fertility rate and educational opportunities for women. However, the authors through case studies show that education of women does not necessarily lead to decreased fertility rate. And then therefore the other debate that was part of the lecture in the first half was whether we use autonomy or agency, and we kind of looked into the limitation of autonomy, which only talks about individual capacity to take decision or kind of experience freedom. It does not talk about the impact that it would have on the other members in the household and in the society, and therefore the use of agency as a more inclusive concept. So in the study, the concept of agency refers to the study done among the women from Bijnor. Through the case study of CEC-UGC, they make an attempt to understand the variation in agency and how the difference in the two communities affect the fertility outcome. So the comparison of CEC-UGC is done on several parameters: marriage arrangement, marriage distance, and women's involvement in marriage arrangement, post-marital residential arrangement, control over economic resources, and reproductive choice. So what we see in this study is a combination of the earlier factors like post-marital residence and economic product, along with the newer indicators like marriage, who takes the main decision in marriage arrangement, what is the role of women in negotiating marriage, the age difference between the conjugal partners. All of these would help us to understand the agency among women. In Bijnor, marriages are arranged by couple parents within Jati, and there is possibility for difference in the family and gender system between the two Jatis. When we look into the marriage arrangement among the two communities, we see that there are certain moral rules influencing marriage choice in almost all caste group. And what are these marriage rules? Number one, preference for the groom to be taller, educated and older than the bride. Younger married couple expected to start their married life sharing the life and resources with the groom's family. Now this second rule suggests the patrilineal form of kinship. The third rule is that it is expected from the son to take care of the parents in old age in father's property, which should be divided only after his death. So the concept of the joint family connected to the co-parsonary or co-owners. So all the male members, by the fact that they are born into a household, become the co-owners of the property, and this property remains undivided till the death of the father. Now, what happens for the girls? The girls are preferably married at a young age, and many a time there were also incidents of child marriage, and the expectation is to kind of give off their daughter in marriage at an early age. So the age difference between the husband and wife added to the limits on most women's ability to negotiate between the marriage. So if the age difference is more between the husband and the wife, the decision making or negotiation becomes difficult. The lesser the age difference between the two, the larger the discussions and ability to bring about their own opinion, women's opinion into the final decision. One difference between Sikh and Jat marriage pattern is that among the Jats, it is parent of the bride that approach the groom family, and it is the reverse among the Sikh. Among the Jats, the parent must assess, since they are going to approach the groom, they initially, before they actually approach, they kind of take assessment of the groom's family before they make the final choice for their daughters, and therefore they are kind of quite aware that if it is from a well-off, economically good family, then the demand would be higher. So this assessment is also kind of a culturally based on the idea that the father or the parents are kind of concerned about the future of the daughter. So they prefer an hypergamous marriage. That is, they would want to marry off their daughters to upper well-off family, and therefore the higher the economic condition of the groom family, the dowry demands would be higher. Jat men who are poor or have other disability may never receive an offer of a bride and hence resort to other means to get one. By contrast, since among the Sikh it is the groom's parent who make the first move, bride's parent feel less pressure to provide more dowry, presuming that groom's family has done inquiries before. So when the boy or the groom's family is going to approach, they have made an assessment of the capacity of the bride's family, the financial position, how much of dowry can be made. Therefore, the pressure is less on the girl's family. Now, the another difference is between the two community is that among the Sikh, marriages are arranged within the family and with people in much closer kin relation, and many girls join familiar household on marriage and have easy access to their natal household. Now this marriage rule of marrying within your familial relation, that is people whom you already know before your marriage, or they are somehow connected to your kin, it becomes easy for the girl to kind of discuss or negotiate her life with the other, which is completely contrast to the Jat community, where the girls are married off to strangers, and even if in other villages, other kind of exogamous marriage. So they kind of find a little kind of place themselves in an unknown setting. The Sikh society, the girls married to familial kin and close to natal household, less pressure of dowry and better relationship with natal kin. Among the Jat, girls are married to long distance village and unrelated kin, higher pressure of dowry and weak ties with parental kin. Now, this one is the rules of marriage, the second is the age between the two conjugal couple, and the third is the marriage distance, and the fourth is involvement of women in marriage negotiation. So when we look into the marriage distance, since the Jat follow the rules of exogamy, girls would be married off at a longer distance, and they were kind of it was a rule that the girl would be given to a household where there was no previous relationship. No case of women being married close geographically or genealogically. That is, the new household which she would be a member was a complete a stranger, and she kind of it would be very difficult for her to then kind of negotiate her or make a decision within among strangers. Women married close, that is within familial kin, and also the distance between the two, the bride's family and the groom's family, is closer. It is expected to have greater choice in selection of spouse, as the chance of meeting prospective groom was high, as they were close or familial kin. However, there was no evidence from Sikh community that women married in close kin played important role in decision making about the marriage. So this idea of marriage distance kind of playing any role in terms of the agency and of the women was kind of problematic. Another procedure which event that they discuss in the research is the child engagement and the second marriage. So the child engagement of betrothal among Muslim is a form of agreement that is not parallel among the Jat. So the agreement of engaging, since it is between the familial kin, close kin, the decision to marry is taken at a young age, and this is not prevalent in the Jat community. As the parties whose marriage is fixed are children, they have no say about whom they would marry and how far from their natal home would they be living. So this kind of raises the concern that in the Sikh community, the agency of women would be low because of the practice of child engagement. The making second marriage, that is men who are kind of economically poor or they have some kind of disability, may not be able to get married through proper negotiation. So the only alternative available to them is to marry off, is to purchase wife, that is to spend money and kind of get their wife. These women had, however, there is no difference in the agency of women who are purchased or those who are kind of married off through the normal marriage negotiation. Now, involvement of women in marriage negotiation, we see that how much, whether the age is less or the distance of your natal house is close or not, do women involve themselves in these marriage negotiation? And the study suggests that there is kind of a very low participation of women in marriage negotiation. One of the reasons is shame and exclusion from marriage decision, because they know that if they are able to take part, they would face kind of the consequence of the bad marriage on them. So daughter's silence is a symbolic of good upbringing and faith in parents' decision. So most of the women are socialized, girls are socialized to not kind of be articulate in front of others and accept the decision of the parents as a just and good decision, and therefore they don't have any kind of right in decision making. The second reason why the involvement is less is fear that the reputation would be affected by any mistake made during marriage negotiation that would further worsen the matter. So the girls are not confident that if they can take a decision because of the cultural barriers that they have grown up with. So there is a lot of fear that if these things go bad, then it would be their fault. Third is young women are not included in the decision making. Most of the time we see that in India, the negotiations are taken up at a larger family and the girls are only told at a later stage. So by then the decision has already been taken and it is not considered appropriate of her to change the decision or interfere in it. The fifth criteria used by Roger Jeffrey and Patricia Jeffrey is the post-residential arrangement. A married woman's life is influenced by the household she resides after her marriage. A woman's role in managing economic resources is determined within the household, as is her workload. So the two indicators of autonomy, but to understand how this influence women's fertility, it is important to understand how women control household finances and what women do in the marital household. The key difference in the household structure is whether she is living in a joint household or she is living separately with the spouse. So we look into two forms of residential pattern, especially post-marriage. One is living jointly, that is the joint household. Now the advantage of living in a joint household is that the house continues to be built and its progress continues. However, the disadvantage is that no individual property can be purchased for the children, and also that all decision has to be confirmed and consented by elders. So individual say or individual autonomy is restricted in a joint household. So the experience of collective actions tends to strengthen common interest. Whatever decision is taken for the interest of all members of the household. Individuals also have conflicting and competing interests which are considered problematic. So the individualism is kind of subsued and familialism is celebrated. On marriage, the responsibility of regulating the women's behavior is transferred from the father to the husband, and in most of the North India, the regulation or the moral guardian of the joint household is generally the mother of the husband. So most dominating kind of the relationship which is subject to lot of movies and teleserial is the relationship in North India between the mother-in-law and the daughter-in-law. So in her marital village, a young woman's movement are limited and she rarely receives emotional support from villagers. In joint household, the daughter-in-law does inside work and most of the outside work would be taken up by the older women. Now the second form of residence, post-marital residence in North India is becoming separate. So the joint household becomes separate when the physical space becomes less for the member or when there is conflicting interest. Among poor household, sons separate from father on growing up and because of the difference in status, economic status, but however they take on the burden of sending money for their everyday need. Joint household are less common among the poor because the poor will not be able to kind of maintain two separate household and the burden of expenses would increase. So the process of separation at time begins when the second son is married. The problem of managing collective enterprises multiplies. Separations are rarely managed without hostility. Separation is not simply a question of content and quantity of work. It also marks change in relationship of power and authority, mostly to a young married woman's benefit. So once the separation takes place, the young woman is outside the control of the older women, and her mobility, her kind of dressing sense and everything she becomes her own kind of regulator, or she takes her own decision. So women living in separate household have more power to negotiate aspects of her everyday life. However, separation also brings some cost, no help available, and women is responsible for all the household work. The benefit of reducing the older women's discipline and regulation is against the kinship ties built in the marital family. Now, another criteria used by Roger Jeffrey and Patricia Jeffrey to understand the agency of women is access to natal kin. A married woman has restricted help from her own parent, but the relations with natal kin are not entirely cut off. So, post-marital relationship between women and her natal home and her final kin are highly structured. So, there is a division between two kinds of family and the roles and responsibility in North India. between the natal home and the marital home. Now, post-marriage, the natal home becomes less significant. However, the parents of the bride continue to provide economic support if and when required. So, the different kind of behavior is expected from women towards her husband's relatives, and especially her the elder relative. So, she has to observe modesty, respect and veil from the elder relatives of her husband, but behaves with freedom in presence of her natal kin. So, this kind of completely two separate world for the women, how you behave, what kind of behavior you do, what kind of dress you do between the two worlds. They are kind of completely opposed to each other, and many a time a woman is kind of pulled by the two relation. One is her natal kin and the other is her marital relations. Now, besides these factors connected to the cultural domain, it is also important to understand the agency by looking into the control that women have over economic resources. So, the key constraint on gender relationship are structures of household in which women live, class and role played by gifts from women's natal home. In joint household, the senior male member takes charge of the agricultural activities and the senior female controls the domestic finance. So, we see that even within a joint household, there is a gender division of labor between the men controlling the economic activities and women controlling the so-called domestic everyday finances. The older women also monitors and regulates exchange of gifts during wedding and rituals. Young women's only income is the gift received from natal family, that is also not absolute and may pass on to the in-laws. So, if we look into the economic resource, now women in a patrilineal residence have no right over the property. This is kind of conservative traditional agrarian setup. Only income that she has is the gift that she is receiving from her natal family, and this exchange of gift in North India is kind of a continuous process. Right from the engagement, marriage, on every occasion, the expectation of the flow of gift from the bride's family to the groom's family. So, a woman living in a separate household organizes the exchange relationship and retains control over gift received from her parent. However, the gift that is received by the girls, especially on the marriage, is not her sole income or property, because the in-laws also have a right over it, and many a time it gets transferred to the husband and to the other relatives. Economic independence is not ensured through the gift received from the natal kin. Why? Because this income is very small compared to the bulk of household finances which are controlled by the men. Nevertheless, women in a separate household feel that they can influence financial matters in ways denied in joint household, since they have to express the only to their husband and not to the other man. The next criteria discussed is reproductive choice. Studies have shown that women with no income and ownership of property have low say in fertility, implying low autonomy. In contrast, the Sikh and Jat women have different fertility experience. Fertility is lower among the Jat than the Sikh. Jat women have low fertility as they have been able to control their reproductive choice. Data from the study suggests that it's men who are the decision maker on issues related to reproductive health. So, when we come to the idea of understanding the relationship between gender and politics, we see that the idea of support from natal kin, that is, while women in wealthier household may have better access and support, women ability to draw support from the natal kins are fairly limited. And social consciousness and cultural hegemony, women's resistance to their subordinate position is constrained by the ruling ideology, controls their consciousness. which is to mean that which we might want to call agency may not be valorized by women out of socially constructed meanings and social consciousness, because women may find it unattractive and frightening. So these are the ways in which we understand the relationship between gender politics and demography. For reference, what we have referred in the lecture is Roger Jeffrey and Patricia Jeffrey's work, Population, Gender and Politics, Demographic Change in Rural North India, published in 1997 by Cambridge University Press. With this, I come to an end of this lecture. Thank you.